This is War of the Suns, Chinese War of Resistance 1937 to 1945 from MMP Games. Now this is probably the last video I do on this particular game. I've decided I've played it enough. In my opinion, it's a Chinese victory, and I'll sort of say why that happened, and I'll also discuss the game after a really good look into it, and what I think are its merits and its demerits, because you've got both. I'll sum it up. I'll give this a 7 out of 10. Its main merit is it's probably the only serious game that you can even look at this. It's certainly the only one that does the China theatre and the Indochina theatre as well. I'm playing with the 1.5 rules, which printed off Board Game Geek. I didn't find any great problems with playing with that rule set, to be quite honest. So I can't comment on what it was like with the original rule set. I think the issue with this game is the guy who made it was too ambitious. He's far too ambitious. There's just so much chrome in this game that isn't really necessary. Still playable, but there's a really steep learning curve. You look at the original rule book and it's just about 37 pages, but that's a microscopic print. You know, when you sort of print out the sort of main, the second rule book, it's a much bigger rule book. Yeah, it comes in at 36 actually. Sorry, so the original one was quite small, but it's very small type, and also it did leave a lot of ambiguities. The main problem I see with it is its fiddliness. If people are going to go for this, you've got to be aware it's potentially very fiddly. Now, I did a bit of house ruling to sort of relieve the fiddliness. The big problems is the way the order of battle's handled. Because every individual unit is named, it's sort of the replacement system is on a named basis as well, and the reinforcement system is on a named basis. And the fact that you'll be asked to, say, combine two units to make a replacement unit. Certain units may be completely withdrawn. Others may be, like Japan, redeployed to different parts of the Japanese Empire. And finding the appropriate unit when there's a lot of counters on the board here. In the Japanese, you're probably talking 50, 60 counters, unit counters there. Chinese, probably more like 100. Communists, probably about... The communists are all sort of generic, so that doesn't really matter. It would have been better if they were sort of generic and it would have said, make them by clique. Yeah, so you can say, oh, that's a 5-strength Ho clique unit. And if you want to combine, you want to break it down, you can break it down into a 3 and a 2 or a 4 and a 1. Just make them like coins. And I know it sort of takes away the historical part of the game, but all this messing around, you see, because I play with blind reinforcements and events, I don't really know, I don't know what's going to happen in the next turn. So often, with me, I was finding that as the Japanese, that suddenly a unit which is absolutely vital to your front line gets deployed back to Japan or off to the Manchuria. Now, you can get around that by studying the order of battle and make sure you don't get surprised. Now, if I got into a situation like that, I'd just say a division had been redeployed to Japan or demobilised. I'd just bring another division nearby and put it into the hex if it's a crucial strategic hex. Also, there are rules in the OB system for all the different variations. What if 2 units have to be combined into another, and ones that are being destroyed, etc. I wasn't getting hung up on that, to be quite honest. If and also sort of say if 2 units have to combine, they've got to be in the same hex. Well, and they've not got to be in an enemy zone of control. Well, that's just ridiculous on a game of this scale. So I would just say find the 2 units and then stick the replacement in one of the hexes where the component units actually were. So loads of little silly little house rules I found that made the game much easier to play. So as I say, be aware it's fiddly, and if you things like, for example, if a unit needed to be sort of replaced or whatever, or demobilised or redeployed, and you couldn't find it, I'd just make a little note on a post-it pad to one side, and then when I did find the unit, I'd just do whatever needed to be done with it. Otherwise, you're ending up sorting through all these stacks. Now I've got all this blue tack, so it's not such a big issue for me. But if you had all the stacks in free format and you were just picking them up with tweezers, you'd have to go through all these stacks to try and find the various units that you need to take an action with. So I looked at it on the basis that this is a season by season game. It's based on HQ activations. There's a huge number of units, probably 200 fighting units on the board at this particular point. And to seriously say that one unit not being deployed in the exact correct place is going to affect the whole game, it's just not going to happen. So my advice is don't get hung up about it. Even the designer said don't get hung up about it. He just said if you can't find the exact unit, find one of the same clique or the same value. But I think that would create a cascading snowball effect, whereas you could replace a unit with one which shouldn't have been replaced, and then later on in the order of battle that one might need to be replaced. And so you'd have to find out what happened to the unit you took off when you should have taken off the original one. So don't get hung up on it. Anyway, I've spent enough time talking about that. That is the major drawback as I see it. Now, that, and combined with the absolute learning cliff that you've got to scale. Now, looking at the game as I played it, I can see what I did wrong. I should have concentrated on Shanghai. In the first few turns, I should have leveraged the Nationalist Army out of the Shanghai pocket area and then opened up the way to Nanking. To an extent, the north of China would look after itself. It was important that this area here was sort of you may remove the nationalist presence from this area, and that sort of stalemated a little bit, even though the Japanese are gradually pushing their way forward. Another thing I did wrong is I didn't blockade Canton from the very start. I did eventually pick up on that. That allowed the Chinese to get more foreign economic points than they could have done. Also, if I'd attacked at Shanghai, I could have got knocked out those 5 factories, which would have been a major bonus to the Japanese. So that's why I say that the Chinese won this, because the Japanese, in reality, got much further here into this area. Also, never having played this, I didn't realise the effect of blowing those Yellow River dikes. What that essentially did was cut the whole front in two. It creates a major barrier to any offensive operation, because you've got severe floods in place along this Yellow River area. All your communication lines are broken, your bridges are permanently destroyed. So if I'd known what was going to go on there, I would have played it slightly differently as well. So my big advice, if you're going to do this, open up this front early as possible. Then don't forget to open up subsidiary fronts, knocking these ports out. I left this sort of attack on the ports a bit late. And because I didn't press the nationalists as much as I could have done, the nationalists were able to build up their strength beyond what they would have achieved historically. The communists, the nationalists have really got to help the communists out, because they're not in any position to do anything. They've got a load of very weak units. Admittedly, they're like generic units, which they can rebuild loads of these generic units, and they can build loads of guerrillas and stuff, but they're not really very effective as conventional troops. But then again, the Japanese wasted quite a lot of effort pushing into the mountains here where it would have been if they'd been in the south here along the coast. They could have used their force much more effectively. Well, that's pretty much all I'll say about it. If you can get a copy, if you like the subject matter and you're prepared to put up with a bit of work, the more you put into this game, the more you get out of it. You'll enjoy it. I can't mention any of the other scenarios, as I only play the campaign and I only play it solo as well. If you're playing it opposed, I appreciate it's a totally different game. But I think it's a game it's had a lot of bad press, and it didn't really deserve it. I think the fact the rule book was a bit of a mess was a bit of a deal breaker for a lot of people. It'll never get a reprint, and if they did do a reprint, I would advise them to change some of the design and make the units very much like the communist units, just generic units, but still assign them by cliques and stuff like that. Because that was one thing, the cliques. It's complication, but it's necessary complication. I don't think you can simulate the war in China without looking at the fact that nationalists were broken into all these factions and cliques. It just wouldn't have been realistic without that. But I don't think you needed to go down to nominating every particular unit and designating them all as their historical equivalents. Okay, there we go.